A lot of people are feeling confused right now about these new comments coming from President Trump about something he's calling a tariff dividend, especially those of you on Social Security, SSDI, SSI, VA benefits, SNAP, or living on a fixed income. When you hear talk about possible checks or extra help, it can feel like a lifeline, but it can also bring a lot of questions and worry. So today, I want to break down exactly what he said, what it might mean for you, and what we realistically know so far, because clarity matters when every dollar counts. There's been a lot of chatter on TV, social media, and news sites, and I've gone through the details so you don't have to sort through all that noise on your own. And the reason this matters is simple. If you're living month to month, juggling rent, groceries, medical copays, or trying to make a single paycheck or benefit stretch, even the idea of a $2,000 check can feel huge. But it's important to understand where things stand and what's real versus what's still just talk. Recently, Trump said again that his administration is planning to use tariff money to issue what he's calling dividends to Americans, especially moderate and middle-income households. He even suggested a rough timeline, saying mid to late 2026 is when checks could possibly start. For someone like a Social Security retiree trying to keep up with rising utility bills or a parent using SNAP to cover groceries, that kind of update feels important. But there's more behind the scenes that needs to be explained. I keep thinking about someone like Linda, a widow in her late 60s living on Social Security survivor benefits. She budgets every penny, keeps a small notebook with her bills written out, and still worries each month whether she can afford both her medication and her electric bill. When she hears about a potential $2,000 payment, her first thought isn't politics, it's survival. But she also needs honesty, not false promises. And that's why understanding the details, what's confirmed, what isn't, and what could get in the way, is so important for people in her situation and for millions of others. So here's what we're going to walk through today. We're going to talk about what President Trump actually said in the Oval Office about these checks, who he says would qualify, and the timeline he's suggesting. We're also going to go over what the Treasury Secretary said, which is very different and adds an important reality check. And we'll talk about what any of this realistically means for Social Security, SSI, SSDI, VA, SNAP, and other low-income households. I want you to feel informed, not misled. Now, this update touches a lot of groups: seniors on Social Security, people on SSDI and SSI, veterans receiving VA disability, single parents, low-income workers, and folks using SNAP or EBT. Each of these groups deals with tight budgets and unpredictable costs, and many of you rely on every program you qualify for. So when the government talks about possible payments, you naturally wonder whether you'd be included, whether it would count as income, and what the catch might be. We'll go through all of that as clearly as possible. Here's the heart of the explanation. President Trump says tariffs have brought in what he describes as hundreds of millions of dollars, and that he wants to use part of that revenue to send dividend checks to Americans. He repeated that the payments would be for moderate and middle-income households, not high-income earners, and he mentioned thousands of dollars, with the number $2,000 used repeatedly. But then he added another piece. Some of the money would also go toward paying down the national debt. That alone suggests it's not as simple as taking money from one bucket and handing it out. But the bigger issue is what Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said in a separate interview. When asked directly about sending tariff dividend checks, he said very clearly that legislation would be required. In other words, Congress would have to pass a law before any of these checks could become real. That means nothing is automatic, nothing is approved, and nothing is scheduled. It's an idea, not a program. That's why it's important not to count on money that isn't guaranteed. Even so, it's understandable why people are paying attention. Imagine someone on SSDI getting around $1,200 a month, or a veteran receiving VA disability who's watching their grocery bill climb every single month. A one-time $2,000 payment could help catch up on rent, pay down a credit card, or cover medical supplies that insurance won't. And while it wouldn't fix everything, it would bring breathing room. That's why these discussions get so much attention, even when the details are uncertain. And because we're talking about possible future payments, we also have to be honest about complications. If a payment like this were ever approved, some benefit programs have income rules. SSI has strict limits. SNAP calculates benefits based on income. Some forms of housing assistance look at household resources. So while a one-time check might help, it could also create short-term changes in eligibility depending on how it's classified. These are the kinds of things people worry about, and it's completely valid to ask those questions. That's why it's important to stay grounded and focus on what you can do right now. If a tariff dividend or any kind of stimulus-style payment ever becomes real, the steps would likely look similar to past programs. Most people wouldn't need to apply if the payments were tied to tax records, but keeping your information updated is always smart. That means making sure the IRS has your correct address and direct deposit information, especially if you've moved or switched banks in the last couple of years. For those of you on Social Security, SSDI, or SSI, it's also a good moment to log into your online account to make sure everything is current. Veterans may want to double-check their va.gov account the same way. These aren't complicated tasks, but they help you avoid delays or missing a potential payment down the road. If something like this were approved, it could make a real difference for a lot of people. Think about a senior living on an $1,100 Social Security check who's constantly choosing between groceries and medication. A payment like this could finally give them a chance to restock their pantry or pay off a lingering bill that's been hanging over their head. Or consider a veteran who's been trying to save for a needed car repair just to get to medical appointments. A check could solve that problem in one shot. Even a parent working part-time and relying on SNAP to keep food on the table might be able to catch up on school clothes, gas, or a small emergency they've been putting off. These aren't luxury purchases. They're the basic things that help the family stay stable. But we also have to be real that even a $2,000 payment won't fix everything, especially when prices keep rising faster than most benefits. Rent goes up. Electricity bills go up. Groceries, especially things like milk, eggs, and canned goods, cost more than they did even a year ago. For many of you, the challenge isn't one big bill. It's the constant pressure of everything being a little more expensive every single month. That's why staying informed about all your options matters. When you understand the programs you qualify for, you can make choices that help you stretch your money a little further. So as we wait to see whether Congress takes up this idea or whether it fades like some of the earlier proposals, it's important to keep your benefits protected. If you're close to an income limit for SSI or SNAP, it may help to talk with a benefits counselor before making any decisions whenever unexpected income comes in. If you're on Social Security or SSDI, knowing your payment schedule and your cost of living increase helps you plan ahead. If you're a veteran, it might be worth checking if you qualify for additional VA programs you haven't applied for yet, like healthcare eligibility or expanded disability benefits. Little steps like these can put you in a better position no matter what happens with these new proposals. At the end of the day, I know many of you are tired. You're doing your best, stretching every dollar, trying to take care of yourself and your family with limited resources. And hearing about possible payments can bring hope, but it can also bring frustration when things seem uncertain or slow. I want you to remember that needing help doesn't make you weak or irresponsible. Millions of Americans, including seniors, people with disabilities, veterans, caregivers, and parents, are going through the same struggles. You deserve support, and you deserve honest information about what's coming and what isn't. So keep staying informed, keep asking questions, and keep taking advantage of every program you qualify for. Small steps really do add up over time, especially when you're consistent. And if a tariff dividend or any other relief payment ever becomes real, I'll be here to break down exactly what it means for you so you don't have to sort through confusing headlines on your own. If you want to stay up to date on Social Security, SSI, SSDI, VA benefits, SNAP, stimulus news, and anything else that affects your wallet, make sure you subscribe and check back for the latest updates. And if you know someone who could use this information, send it their way so they don't miss out. You're not alone in this, and together we'll get through whatever comes next.